Hello everyone! So this week I'm going to talk about something that I never talked about before on my channel, I don't think. And it's all about all these YouTubers that make videos where they say they've learned X language in a month or 3 months or a week even. And all of these things that sort of create an expectation of how long learning a language should take and how the process should be and all that stuff. So the first thing I want to talk about is sort of a definition of fluency, really, because I think it's important to know what we're talking about, or at least what I mean when I talk about fluency. And for me, fluency, it's kind of a hard word to define, and I know there's lots and lots of people who have tried to define it before. I think for most people, fluency, what it means is that you're able to communicate smoothly in your target language. So we're not talking about not making any mistakes or having a perfect accent, because accent and fluency are completely different, but really we're talking about someone who is able to sort of go to the country where the language is spoken and be able to sort of navigate without too many issues, be able to communicate basic things, and also be able to sort of chat in the language with people, maybe have friends or that kind of thing. So it does require quite advanced skills in the language, but for me that's fluency. If you were under that level, you would be more like functional in the language, or you would be maybe conversational, which I think is under fluency, in my opinion anyway. But feel free to write in the comment section below what your definition of fluency is and how maybe it differs from mine. That could be interesting to sort of have your thoughts on this. So what is my opinion on all of these videos, apps, companies that sort of promise you fast progress, easy progress in your target language? So let's talk about the videos we see on YouTube. So I've seen quite a lot of these videos where people say how I've learned, I don't know, Spanish, French or Japanese in 1 month. And for Japanese, I can't really judge because I'm not fluent in Japanese, although I'm learning it, but I am fluent in French and Portuguese and English, obviously. So I am able to sort of give judgment on those videos. And often what I found is that when people say they've learned French in a month or 3 months or, you know, that kind of short duration, they're not really fluent in French. I think the level they seem to reach, which is not me sort of dissing them, it's great, like any level you reach in any amount of time is great, but really the level they reach is usually around A2, more or less. Sometimes a bit of B1, but I wouldn't say they're able to sort of communicate smoothly because they are still at basic level. The French is not particularly sort of complex. And I don't think with A2 you're really able to have a long conversation or like a normal conversation. And I'm not talking about being able to talk about science or, you know, something really advanced, but really just being able to communicate, you know, give your opinion about the film you've watched or that kind of stuff. And my opinion on these videos is that, well, as a YouTuber myself, I know that there's this competition and always that kind of pressure of making views and getting lots of attraction for these videos. So you need to create lots of clickbait titles and all that stuff, which is a whole nother story, but it's, you know, obviously part of the reason why a lot of people come out with these videos and sort of setting high expectations of language learning. Or even you could say low expectations of what fluency actually is. And it is what it is. It is YouTube. People want to make views, they want to be popular. I don't really jump into that train so much, just because that's not my thing. But it's important to know that these people oftentimes will do this kind of videos for the views, for the clicks. And that's important not to sort of develop that expectation that language learning should ever be easy or even short. And often, and I think that's something that Matt vs. Japan mentioned, when you're not a native speaker of the language or you're not fluent in the target language, it's really hard for you to really have an idea of how fluent the person actually is. And only a native speaker, so I will be able to judge, you know, the level of someone's French or Portuguese because I'm a native speaker of both, but I wouldn't be able to judge someone who, for example, speaks Japanese because I do speak a bit of Japanese, but I don't have that level to really, judge. And it's very important to remember that, because if you're not in that position where you're fluent in the language already, you have no idea how fluent the person is, and you might end up thinking that this person has done amazing progress, maybe much better progress than you in 1 month, when actually they reach A2, which is really doable in a month of, fairly sort of regular study, I would say. And to be honest, I've watched a lot of these videos, and often the pronunciation is not great. So French is obviously a really hard language to pronounce. No one is going to argue against that. But like, you can't really claim fluency if your pronunciation doesn't really follow, because the point of a language is to be able to communicate and be understood. And if I, as a native speaker, and even someone who's taught foreigners for over 5 years, I can't understand them clearly without ambiguity, then obviously they still need to make progress, and they're not fluent in the language. No way. For me, someone who is fluent in the language might have an accent, but the pronunciation should be clear, so that it's not ambiguous and easily understandable. And the thing that I think is quite a shame about these videos is that they create really bad expectations of language learning. Because for me, I think it takes more than 5 years to learn a language. So when these people make lots of views and have people looking up to them for their fast language learning progress, then it just makes people believe that they can do it too, but really, you never know how the video has been done. You don't know if the person has rehearsed many times before doing the video. There's also cuts, so there could have been many hesitations. They could have had time to look up words, check the grammar, whatever. You don't know what happens behind the scenes. So really, I think you have to take these videos with a pinch of salt, because you never know. You really never know. And it might be that this person is actually quite competent in French in 1 month, and they might have learned a lot of language, but it can also mean that they just learned exactly what they needed for the video, and that's it. Again, I don't want to come across as someone who is sort of dissing people who've made progress in any language, even if it's learning 10 words. I think learning 10 words in a language is amazing, but it's more the way it's marketed or the way it's sort of shown or presented that I think is very problematic, because it's false. There is no way you will be fluent in a language in 1 month. Even if the language is very close, you can get to a pretty nice and high level, but you still wouldn't be fluent. Because, I mean, I'm adding more nuances to the definition I gave at the beginning of the video. But for me, fluency is not just in terms of, accuracy of words and grammar, but it's also understanding of the culture and being able to communicate in a way that's fairly natural. And natural is a tricky sort of word, because natural, even in English, sometimes I don't sound natural, and I'm more than advanced in English, I guess. I mean, unadvanced. But I guess the idea, and it's hard to explain, is that you want to communicate in a way that makes sense in the language, and not just speak the language as like if you were translating from your native language to the target language, if that makes sense. Because if you do that, you will sound quite unnatural. And that's not something you can achieve in a month or even a year. Like, a year is such a short amount of time to speak the language for, for most people, because unless you are doing 10 hours of the language every day for a year, then I guess you won't be reaching a really high level, and that's okay. Like, for example, I've been learning Japanese on and off for a few years, but really more seriously for 3 years, or I think 3 years. And my progress is really slow, and that's fine. But it's kind of, problematic when people come out with videos like, I've learned French in 30 days or a month or whatever, because they didn't. And learning is kind of like fluency. They sort of play on the fact that learning is quite an ambiguous word for the clicks, essentially. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. It'd be interesting for me to hear about your opinions, so feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you think. Do you think my opinion is a bit off, or do you think you're quite on board with what I just said? And on this note, I will stop there, and I will see you next week. Bye!